The Russian capital was suddenly plunged into darkness, illuminated only by explosions. Just hours earlier, Russia had launched more than 700 drones and missiles at Ukraine. They hit energy facilities and civilians. Putin thought he would freeze Ukraine, plunge it into darkness, and bring it to its knees. But Ukraine's response was instant. Hours later, on the night of October 31st, 2025, Russia's capital faced the most powerful, most coordinated attack in its history since the start of the war. The attacks. On the morning of November 1st, the main Directorate of Intelligence of Ukraine officially confirmed the operation. This confirmation revealed the gravity of the incident. This was not a random drone attack. Not just one pipeline, but three main pipelines carrying gasoline, diesel, and most critically, jet fuel for the army. All three were blown up simultaneously. The very heart of this system was the Ramenskoye region in the Moscow Oblast. This area was home not only to military command centers, but also to fuel, communications, and air defense control infrastructure. The Koltsovoy pipeline in Ramenskoye was the center, pumping lifeblood to the capital. But now this fiction has been shattered. So why was this pipeline so important? The answer lies in what it carried. This pipeline could pump 3 million tons of aviation fuel, up to 2.8 million tons of diesel fuel, and up to 1.6 million tons of gasoline per year. Kiev did not attempt to leave all of Russia without fuel. It chose a much more surgical, much more symbolic, and for Putin, much more painful target. The Ramenskoye region, where the attack took place, is no coincidence. It is home to Russia's most important military-industrial center and the Zhukovsky air base. Let's understand Zhukovsky's importance. It is Russia's main flight test center. The fifth-generation Su-57 fighter jets, strategic Su-35SS, and the newest S-70 Okhotnik heavy attack UAVs, which Putin markets to the world as the best, are developed, tested, and deployed here. What does cutting this pipeline mean? It means directly sabotaging not only the current fleet, but also Russia's future air power test and development programs. The flow of jet fuel, the lifeblood of the Su-57 program, has been disrupted. Putin's propaganda machine's most important toy is at risk of being grounded due to lack of fuel. The Koltsovoy pipeline supplied fuel to the main depots feeding the air bases belonging to the 1st Special Purpose Air and Missile Defense Army, tasked with protecting Moscow like a shield. This was the fuel insurance for the capital's air defense. Two key bases have had their fuel supply cut off by this operation. The first is the Zhukovsky Air Base. This is not just a base, but a command center for the Russian aerospace forces and home to the 8th Special Purpose Aviation Regiment. More importantly, it is the main transport hub for Russian special forces and high-ranking military personnel. Striking the logistics of this base strikes at the mobility of the Russian army's most elite units. The second is the Kubinka Air Base. This is the main base for Russia's most elite Su-30 and MiG-29 pilots. These teams are the main propaganda and show of force that Putin uses to sell weapons to his allies. It is also a key fighter jet base for Moscow's Western Air Defense Shield. Finally, Ostafievo International Airport. Although it appears to belong to Gazpromavia on paper, it is actually a center heavily used by the Ministry of Defense and especially the FSB for special operations, VIP transportation, and secret flights. Ukraine did not cut off all of Moscow's fuel. However, it crippled the system. Now, fuel to these vital bases will have to be transported by vulnerable, slow, and much more expensive rail tankers or thousands of tanker trucks. This creates a logistical nightmare. Costs skyrocket, resupply times lengthen, and most importantly, these new road and rail routes become hundreds of kilometers of new, easy targets for future Ukrainian drone or partisan sabotage attacks. This military paralysis was only one side of the coin. Putin's loss was not just millions of tons of fuel or crippled military bases. The real loss was to the Russian leader's reputation. Putin was selling one thing to the Russian people, and especially to the elite in Moscow. The special military operation in Ukraine was a border issue. Moscow was a safe fortress. On the night of October 31st, 2025, the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine shattered this propaganda. Ukraine did not just send drones from the border, it infiltrated right up to the capital, to Ramenskoye, and was able to blow up a well-protected military facility. The Russian people now see this reality. Putin's security apparatus is incapable of protecting even the capital's most critical facility. This is the tearing up of the regime's social contract in the eyes of the Moscow elite. The promise of stability and security is gone. The first reaction of Russian local authorities and propaganda channels was to cover up this fiasco. As Kyiv Independent noted, they tried to dismiss the power outages and explosion sounds in the Zhukovsky area as automatic equipment malfunctions or technical work. However, HUR's official confirmation of the operation, the evidence that 3 lines exploded simultaneously, and the international media's coverage of the incident made it impossible to hide that Moscow was experiencing a security crisis. This is a propaganda collapse. Local telegram channels turned into panic centers beyond the regime's control. The timing of this sabotage demonstrates Ukraine's genius in technological asymmetry and innovation. This sabotage occurred almost simultaneously with Russia's large-scale drone attack on November 1st, which it boasted about, claiming to have shot down 98 drones. This was a hybrid attack deliberately designed to cause confusion. By sending hundreds of drones, they locked Russia's air defense systems into the sky. All operators, radars, and command centers were focused on the threat above. While all attention was on the sky, the HUR sabotage team caught the pipeline off guard. This crippled Russia's one-dimensional approach to defense. Air defense couldn't prevent sabotage on the ground. Internal intelligence couldn't cope with the swarm of drones in the air. By combining the two threats, HUR blew the fuses of the Russian security apparatus. So, how was this impossible sabotage possible? This propaganda collapse in the heart of Moscow raises a much deeper question in the Kremlin corridors. Is this just a Ukrainian success, or is it the result of a betrayal within Russia itself? HUR's reports emphasize that the facility was protected by drone-proof nets and armed guards. This means a physical security cordon that is nearly impossible to breach. Infiltrating such a facility in the Moscow Oblast, crossing hundreds of kilometers of enemy lines, is almost a suicide mission. This raises a much more disturbing possibility, even a necessity: help from within. The success of this operation likely relies on deep divisions within the FSB or GRU. The fact that Ukraine's HUR has a mole who knows exactly where the pipeline runs, when defense shifts change, and where the blind spots in the networks are, greatly increases the operation's chances of success. An even more dangerous scenario is that this sabotage is part of a power struggle among the Russian security elite themselves. For example, between the Defense Ministry and the FSB, or the simmering mutiny potential within the army since Prigozhin's rebellion. The HUR is skillfully exploiting these rifts, possibly recruiting disgruntled officers or officials. This is more frightening for Putin than a military coup. Who can Putin trust now? The Rosgvardia Guard tasked with protecting the pipeline, the FSB agent supervising that guard, that agent's commander. This mole war must trigger a witch hunt within the Russian security apparatus. This kind of climate of distrust paralyzes an intelligence agency from within. Budanov didn't just blow up a pipeline, he blew up the dynamics of trust within the FSB itself. This is the real internal collapse that occurred in Ramenskoye. The evidence supporting this mole war theory is hidden in the technical details of the operation, i.e., how it was carried out. However, the most critical finding of this investigation lies in the question of how the defense was breached. This was an impossible sabotage. Because this target was one of Russia's most heavily guarded facilities, HUR specifically emphasized that the facility was protected by anti-drone defense systems and armed security forces. These two details prove that the operation was not a drone attack. After the Moscow drone attacks in 2023 and 2024, Russia spent billions of rubles to build massive physical drone nets around precisely these types of strategic infrastructure facilities. These nets were designed to physically stop low-flying FPV or Shahed-type drones. Armed guards were also present at the facility. This is not a civilian guard. This is a fully equipped, militarized security force protecting a strategic military facility, likely affiliated with Rosgvardia or supervised by the FSB. So how was this defense breached? The HUR's confirmation that 3 lines were detonated simultaneously means only one thing. This was a ground operation involving the use of multiple explosives, precisely placed, timed, or remotely controlled and coordinated. This proves that a sabotage team affiliated with Ukraine's HUR, or local partisan cells linked to them, physically infiltrated one of Moscow's most secure, heavily guarded areas. This is one of the greatest embarrassments imaginable for Russia's internal intelligence service, the FSB. The FSB's job is precisely to prevent this. This is a strategic fiasco showing that Moscow's internal security, marketed as a fortress, is an illusion, and that even the Kremlin's backyard is riddled with holes. This daring sabotage on October 31st, 2025, is not an isolated act. It is the final and most painful stage of a methodical plan that shows how Ukraine's war strategy has evolved. This attack is the most concrete proof of the doctrine that HUR President Kirillo Budanov outlined months ago in an interview with Kiev Independent. Our attacks have been more effective than sanctions. This is a mathematical fact. This is an evolution that undermines Russia's strategic depth doctrine. We can examine this evolution in 3 stages. The first stage was to strike production. From early 2024 to mid-2025, Ukraine's main strategy was to strike the production facilities that fed Russia's war economy. Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, Tuapse, Volgograd. Ukraine's long-range drones systematically targeted these facilities deep within Russia. This strategy created panic on the Russian home front, leading to fuel shortages, price increases, and civil unrest. According to President Zelensky, these attacks reduced Russia's refining capacity by 20% to 27%. This was effective economic attrition, but it was not fast enough to stop the Russian army. Phase 2. High-value targets. In the second half of 2025, the strategy evolved. HUR now began targeting not only the economy, but also Russia's most valuable military capabilities. They struck radars, S-400 batteries, and command centers. The peak of this phase was the destruction of the Oreshnik strategic missile system at Kapustin Yar on September 24, 2025. This was a strike against a high-value military target close to Russia's nuclear capabilities. It was a strategy designed to confuse and blind. The third phase, striking the distribution. The Koltsavoy pipeline attack is the third and most sophisticated phase of this evolution. Ukraine is no longer just targeting production or high-value assets. Now, it is targeting the distribution of fuel produced to the army. Why waste dozens of drones to hit 10 different refineries? Cutting a single pipeline that carries fuel from 10 refineries to the army in the capital has a much more devastating effect. Moreover, this attack combines logistical strangulation with a collapse of the home front. The war's shift to Moscow's heart, Ramenskoye, is the mathematical proof of Budanov's doctrine. This single act of sabotage has the potential to inflict more direct military and psychological damage than months of Western economic sanctions. The international repercussions of this sabotage are much greater than the explosion on the pipeline. Analyses of this incident are currently underway in Beijing, Tehran, Pyongyang, and Brussels. This operation sent a clear message to Western intelligence agencies. Moscow's internal security is a paper tiger. If Ukrainian special forces can infiltrate the most protected, most elite military-industrial zone like Ramenskoye, it proves how vulnerable Russia's internal intelligence and physical security are. NATO's entire threat perception and defense planning towards Russia is currently being updated according to this new reality. Russia is not as strong a fortress as it appears to the outside world. However, the real blow is being felt on Putin's allies' front. Putin constantly demands weapons, technology, drones, and missiles from these allies. To get this aid, he promises them power and stability. He tries to show them that Russia will win this war and that it is a reliable partner against the West. So, what did they see on the night of October 31st? China, Iran, and North Korea saw that the man they gave weapons and money to couldn't even protect the most strategic fuel pipeline right at the doorstep of his own capital, Moscow. Now ask yourself, if you were the decision maker in Beijing or Tehran, what would you think? How much trust would you place in a leader who cannot guarantee his own security? who suffers sabotage in his own backyard. This is a strategic humiliation that destroys Putin's bargaining power. Putin now approaches these allies not as a strong partner, but as a needy, vulnerable leader. This situation will increase the cost of support from his allies, perhaps even risking a complete cut-off of support. Moreover, this operation forces Putin into an impossible choice. Russia has thousands of kilometers of strategic pipelines, railways, and infrastructure. It cannot protect them all. Will it withdraw critical units on the front line, air defense systems, and Spetsnaz guards to protect pipelines in Moscow, St. Petersburg, or Ryazan? If it does, the front line will collapse. Will it focus on the front and accept the risk of logistical paralysis in the capital and a security fiasco on the home front? In either case, as Budanov said, this single operation has dealt a more effective, faster, and more devastating military and economic blow than international sanctions. What exploded on the night of October 31st, 2025, in Ramenskoye, Moscow Oblast, was not just a pipeline. It was Putin's illusion of a secure Moscow. It was the main artery feeding the capital's air defense shield. It was the inadequacy and impotence of Russian internal intelligence. The main directorate of Ukrainian intelligence brought the war not only to the front lines, but also to the most strategic logistical backbone at the heart of Moscow. A boom erupted in the Moscow Oblast, and this boom reverberated in the deepest corridors of the Kremlin. Drone defense networks and armed guards could not stop HUR's daring sabotage. Now the Su-57s, Su-35s, and elite fighter jets that should be protecting Moscow face the risk of being deprived of the jet fuel they need. This is a logistical choke point, a military blind spot, and an irreversible strategic fiasco for Putin, unfolding before the eyes of his own people and allies. The fortress has fallen from within. Thank you for watching.